Hello everybody, welcome to the Saroy channel. I really appreciate my listeners. I love you guys so much, and thank you for subscribing to my channel. I appreciate it so very much. And I have an exciting story for you tonight which you're really going to love, and it's about a park ranger's encounter with a Bigfoot. So let's get started. I hope you enjoy the story. Dear Sarah and all your listeners, I'm writing to tell you about my experience with the creature that you listeners, or your listeners rather, call Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or the hairy man. I was a park ranger for about 20 years, and I truly believe it was the most wonderful job in the whole wide world, because your desk is really and truly the great outdoors, or the natural world, and what could be more spectacular and fulfilling than that? I have never been motivated by money. You see, I always knew that money could never buy me the quality of life that nature provides. And believe me, I was right. Every day when I went out into the great outdoors or the natural world to check on wild animals in their natural habitats, I would sometimes have to pinch myself because I could not believe just how lucky I was to have such an amazing job. I can tell you and all your listeners with all sincerity that you could have given me $1 billion and I would not have swapped my job for all the tea in China. That is how magnificent nature is. And the great thing is, it doesn't cost you a dime. It's a gift of God. Over the years, when other people have been given jobs in wildlife, in protection or conservation, or other jobs in national parks, I have observed that people have changed so much. If they were previously reserved and a little on the shy side, I have seen them blossom and open up like a beautiful flower. Then there are those who were depressed or anxious, and I have seen them brighten up and become happy, like the loveliest colour. And then there are those who have been overly confident and maybe a little cocky, and I have seen them gain humility. So there is no better way to become balanced than to go out into nature. So a word of advice to all your listeners: if there is any imbalance in their lives of any kind, you can fix it by going out into nature, and it'll all be sorted out, and that's a guarantee. Anyway, back to my story. One day when I was riding my black horse called Dandelion Darling, I noticed she was not happy about something, and it concerned me greatly, because she has never behaved in such a strange way before. In truth, she is one of the most docile, easygoing, and mellow horses that I have ever known. Nothing ever fazed her at all, and she took life in her stride. On this occasion, her ears were right back, her head was raised up, and she stood up on her hind legs and literally tried to throw me off her back, something that she's never done before. I got off her, and she literally bolted, galloping away in the opposite direction as fast as her legs would carry her. I had never seen my horse behave in such a fearful manner. As a park ranger, I naturally looked for the possible suspects, like a stalking predator of some kind or a snake in the grass, but I found nothing. One thing struck me as extremely odd, and that was everything was much quieter than usual, and that was very weird. There were no signs of the usual animals I would see on my daily excursions, and none of the usual bird calls you would usually expect to hear. Even though it was early in the morning, I just felt something wasn't quite right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I suddenly noticed a very unpleasant odour in the air, like the smell of decaying flesh and damp, sweaty trainers. I did look around for the source of that sulphurous odour, and again I found nothing. I decided to venture towards the creek with its beautiful waterfall that literally cascaded from a high mountainous outcrop over the creek. It was always spectacular at the best of times. As I looked at the top of the mountainous ledge, at the top of the waterfall, I could see the silhouette of a dark bipedal form, and it did not look totally human. It had an ape-like appearance, but it looked gargantuan, even though I was seeing it from a fair distance. I would estimate that even a grizzly bear was way smaller than this formidable-looking creature. The creature saw me, and he let out an enormous roar. Ah! I was absolutely terrified. As a park ranger, I can honestly say I have never felt so much anxiety rise up through my entire body. I almost felt as if I was having a sudden heart attack because I was barely able to breathe. I know now that I was actually experiencing what they call a panic attack. The creature looked at me one more time and threw a couple of rocks down the cascading waterfall, and I knew those rocks were meant for me, and they were huge. I just literally fled the scene, and I did not tell a soul what I had seen for fear of being disbelieved. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how I felt. What the heck was that, I would wonder over and over again over the course of several weeks. Many weeks passed, and life resumed to normal, and there was no sign of the monstrous creature, which for me was a monumental relief. I never wanted to encounter that thing ever again. Once in a lifetime was way too much for me. One day, at the park, a young girl called Chloe went missing, and there was no sign of her anywhere. Her mother told me that she had gone for a call of nature behind a large oak tree and then never returned. We recruited helicopters and every available source of help we could get, and there was absolutely no trace of the girl apart from one of her green hair ribbons that was found caught on a hedge of thorns. As you can imagine, the mother was frantic with despair and worry and anxiety, and she was certain that some kind of ill had become her daughter, or that her daughter had succumbed to a terrible fate. As a park ranger, I was also certain that something terrible had happened to her child, and almost convinced the child was dead. A day later, the child was found safe and well, and no worse for wear. Her mother told me that her daughter was saying some crazy stuff and was making all kinds of silly little stories up. I think the mother believed that her kid had wandered off. If that had been the case, we would have found her. Of that I can assure you. Those rescue helicopters do one hell of a job, and they really scan the terrain thoroughly, and so does the ground force. I asked her if I could talk to her child and take the kid for some ice cream, and her mother agreed. Chloe told me that two small monkey people took her to a little cave and they played games with her. How small were they? I asked. Chloe lifted her hands up to about 1.5 feet in height. What did you play? I asked her. She said they drew in the ground with sticks and they threw pebbles in the water and they played peekaboo. Did they talk to you? No, silly. Monkey men don't talk. They go like this, she said, making a funny chattering sound. And laughed. Did you see any big monkey men? I asked. Only one, and she hid me from the big horrible one. Why was he horrible? I asked. 'Cause he growls and he's cross and he's big and scary. Did he scare you? I asked. She nodded her head. What about the mother? Did you see her? Chloe smiled. She was nice. She hid me from the horrible big one. Where did you hide? In the cave, she said. Who brought you back? I asked. The monkey lady, silly. I could not get more out of the child, but I did go investigating the area where she was found. Luckily, the ground was still wet from heavy rainfall a week previous. It was there that I saw a gargantuan footprint that was about 20 inches which I'm sure you appreciate is very huge. The large toe was splayed out further than a human toe, and there was a kind of ridgeline in the middle of the foot. At least that is what it looked like. I did make a plaster cast of it, but sadly over the years it has degraded considerably. But somehow I feel that finding the footprint where Chloe was found does add credence to the kid's story, and I do believe the child was not telling porkies. As for the monstrous creature, I did have an experience with him one more time while I was working at that park. Once again my horse bolted, leaving me stranded, and I was standing close to another water source at a different location in the park. I recognized all the warning signs, the quietness of the area, the odorous smell, and I also, on top of that, heard heavy breathing that scared the living daylights out of me because it sounded way too close for comfort. I recognized that I was being stalked because every time I took a step forward, so did it. If I stopped, it stopped too. Eventually I shot several rounds of ammo in the air, and the creature let out a huge roar. Ah! And then I saw this black shadow-like creature darting away with enormous strides, and all I could see was the black silhouette and gargantuan girth and width through the undergrowth. So that's my Bigfoot story. And yes, I believe that Sasquatches do exist in the forests of North America. Are they dangerous? I would say yes, but not all of them. It would seem most of them keep away from humans, but there are people who have had good and bad experiences with these creatures. And sometimes I gather Sasquatches have even helped people, like the mother helped little Chloe on that day. In the case of Chloe, I think she went for a wee, and I think her life was in danger because I think the large male Bigfoot was possibly around. I think the female Bigfoot, paternal's instinct, went into an overdrive and she ferried little Chloe away for safekeeping in the shelter of a cave, where Chloe played with her female young cubs. When the female Bigfoot thought the male was safely out of the way, she returned the child to a safe place where she knew humans would eventually find her. I hope you enjoyed my story. Thank you so much, Rory, for a fabulous story from a park ranger. I hope you believed it. And until next time, good night.